Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith. I asked a bunch of people on Twitter, hit me up with your questions on Masters of the Universe Revelation coming to Netflix July 23rd. And they hit me with a bunch of questions, so I'm going to scroll through and answer them as quickly as I can. But mind you, I got long answers. I'm very long-winded. Hank Ronson wants to know, what was it like to meet the man, the legend, the great Alan Oppenheimer? Absolute honor. I took pictures with him that day when he came in, talked to him. It was very important for us to have Alan in the show. Obviously, he didn't get to play Skeletor, although you hear him in episode 1. If you listen closely, you'll hear Alan Oppenheimer doing a cameo. At the very end of the episode, you'll hear it. But this is a man who's been involved with a storied franchise that all of us working on Revelation, he's got the most time on it. And he's such a lovely guy, wonderful guy, very funny, tons of stories for days, and moving stuff too. We brought him into the Masters of the Universe Revelations after show that will be on Netflix after our episodes. And he tells a very moving story about like somebody who is like, that show stopped me from committing suicide. So he's absolutely the best. What a wonderful gentleman. Okay. Dodge Mega says, does the 2002 reboot factor in at all, or is it now ignored? It's not so much ignored as we can't really touch it. Let me explain. Masters of the Universe has many parents, so to speak. Mattel birthed it in 1981. They created Masters of the Universe, which includes He-Man, Teela, Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, Skeletor, Evelyn, all the original toys. Then more authors joined the party when DC Comics starts doing their Masters of the Universe line of comic books. DC Comics is responsible for inventing Prince Adam, the other side, the alter ego, if you will, of He-Man. Why? Because DC Comics, that's what they do. Batman, Superman, all their heroes have a secret identity. So they approached He-Man the same way. Like, he's also got a secret identity. It's when he picks that sword up and says something, that's when he becomes He-Man. So that wasn't even invented, by Mattel. It's not part of the Mattel lore for the figures. That came in the comics, and then it was translated over to the Filmation cartoons. The Filmation cartoons add more spokes to the legacy. They create Orco and other things as well. So there's a lot of parents, a lot of hands on this. Then in 2002, as mentioned, there was the great Mike Young Productions version of the show that was very true to all the characters and whatnot. But that version, just like the Filmation version, is not owned by Mattel or Netflix, obviously. Ours is a Mattel television production, and it's airing on Netflix. So we can't touch some elements that belong to other people who hold those other copyrights. For example, Universal owns the copyright and all the episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the Filmation show. They have the Filmation library. So we weren't going to be using the song because it belongs, the open He-Man, it belongs to Universal, and that would have required, actually negotiating, putting up loot for it. And plus, Bear wanted to do a score, a real score, just like, we're homaging the Filmation version, spiritual sequel, but not a direct sequel, if you will. So at that point, we knew that there's certain things we can't touch because they're not ours to play with. So the 2002 version of Masters of the Universe, the Mike Young Productions, we couldn't play with any of their elements, any of their storylines, because they weren't Mattel's storylines. They belonged to the company that made that cartoon and whoever holds all those cartoons. So ours was always meant to be the toys, predicated on the Mattel lore, which is very rich. They had mini comics. They set up, a lot of the franchise. They set up mostly everything about Masters of the Universe. So we stuck with that. Like it's a Mattel television production, so naturally Mattel was like, do the real version of Masters of the Universe, which is our version of Masters of the Universe. So we don't get to touch on that, but I urge anybody who loves Masters of the Universe to go check out the Mike Young Productions version of the show. It was, I hope I'm saying that right and not mistaking the name. as a stoner at almost age 51. Names and dates. Like some cat on the internet was like, you said that you watched this in 1981 and it didn't come out on TV until 1983. You're a liar, a liar. And I was like, well, maybe, or perhaps I'm just a 51-year-old man who, for about 25 years of his life, referred to The Empire Strikes Back, one of his favorite films ever made, as a 1979 motion picture, even though, as I found out later on, it came out in 1980. Like, I smoke a lot of weed, kids. Don't crush my nuts if I say 1981 versus 1983. Columbo. There's no proof of fucking anything other than like he's old. But if you've not seen that version of Masters of the Universe, go watch it. They did a wonderful, wonderful job. Okay. Faking Insanity says, how much pressure did you feel in adding to such an iconic media presence? Huge. You know, normally I work on Jay and Silent Bob and there's no pressure because it's like, well, I created it, you know, so there's no like, I got to live up to the legacy. I'm like, I got to live up to the jackass who created it and I am that jackass. So no, there's generally not a lot of pressure in the writing that I do because they're my characters and you're not playing with somebody else's toys. But this, playing with Masters of the Universe, I was literally playing with somebody else's toys, Mattel's toys. So there's a huge amount of pressure going in. I didn't want to be one of those people that's like, everything you know about Masters of the Universe is wrong. I'm going to reinvent it. They didn't ask for a reinvention. They were like, we want something that is going to play to the fans. Like the hardcore fans, people who grew up watching the cartoon, collected the toys. This is for them, and we think you're the guy because you worked on your Daredevil comics and your Green Arrow comics. Rob was saying, he's like, that to me says you're the guy. So if they had come to me and said, we want you to reinvent this, the way that they did reinvent She-Ra, I would have been like, I'm not your guy. I'm so not creative or inventive. But if in a world where they were like, we want you to keep going, to tell the next story, like what happens if these cats all grew up and someone died, I'd be like, I can definitely do that. I could tell that story. So I felt the pressure and we approached it the way Marvel approaches. We took the Marvel method, we said, Marvel Cinematic Universe method, which is, I loved all those stories growing up, reading them in comic books, and now I love them again as they're fed back to me with new recipes, spruced up as movies and stuff like that. So the idea here was the same thing. Like, we're not disavowing any part of the lore. It all plays. It's all real. We're just augmenting to it. Add another spoke to the wheel, not reinvent the wheel by any stretch of the imagination. So if you want something reinvented, don't come to Kevin Smith. But if you want something lovingly sequelized, almost devotedly so, I was definitely the right person for the job, I feel like. Okay. Kaneda, or Xbox Kaneda, says, how nervous were you about how the fandom would react to you executing your ideas for the new season? Not very. Honestly, we had the two biggest fans in the world working on the show. So our exec at Netflix, Ted Biaselli, the whole reason this exists is because Ted loved the show as a kid, and he was like, I always dreamed they would do a version that's grown up, where people could die and there are stakes and stuff. So we had him at Netflix, and then we had the great Rob David at Mattel Television. Rob is a very funny guy. He should be on a stage. He's got quick wit. But he's also a writer as well. So he doesn't just run Mattel Television and stuff. He's writing the other Masters of the Universe, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe show, the cartoon show that they're doing on Netflix as well. And he wrote the Masters of the Universe comics, for DC for the last few years. So Rob is steeped in the lore. So between those two titans, we called ourselves the Three Towers of Preternia, I could not fail. I wasn't worried about the reaction of the audience because I knew who the audience was. I was working for the audience. Teddy represented the exact customer we were trying to reach. And then in the process of making it, you realize, we can expand it. It doesn't have to just be for fans, because we know every fan's going to bring their kid to the table and be like, this is what I watched when I was a kid. So, we made it more accessible to not just, it wasn't so deep cuts that only hardcore fans could understand it. Anybody could enter into the episodes and pretty much follow along what's going on and enjoy it and stuff. So I never felt scared. I was never like, what's the audience going to say? Because I knew who the audience was. It was Teddy. And Teddy loved every step of the way. And if he didn't love something, he made it so that he did love it. He'd be like, can we do this? Can we add this? I'm like, oh my God, yeah. Great. Like, Marlena in episode, it ain't, well, spoilers. You'll see. Teddy, knowing that since we had his sign off for everything, I was never worried about the audience seeing it because I'm like, if that guy likes it, everybody's going to like it. If you love Masters of the Universe. If you're a true Masters of the Universe fan. A lot of posers out there. A lot of people are like, I watched that when I was a kid, man, and you're doing it wrong. They didn't watch every episode, I assure you. I did in the 80s. I was not like a hardcore, like, fuck, I love this shit. I made fun of it a lot because I was 13 years old, and I was like, this is for babies. They don't even fight. Nobody gets stabbed. But I watched every episode because back then there was nothing on TV. We didn't have cable. We didn't have the fucking internet, so you watched what was on. So I watched every episode of Masters of the Universe. And there's a lot of people who are like, you don't know anything about Masters, who literally have not watched every episode of the series. Because they were born like 20 years later and stuff. So I felt very safe, particularly with Rob and Teddy on my side. And I knew what we were doing was reverential and loving. So honestly, I was never really worried about the audience reaction. Especially Powerhouse Animation had our backs, man. Like, even if the scripts were stupid, Powerhouse made a beautiful looking fucking show. So I never sweated. Joe Star's sister, Meg's Jedi, says, did your eyes pop when you saw the new animation style? Absolutely. The boys at Powerhouse and the girls, but our two directors, Pat and Adam, they found a way to just draw what we all know and just make it look cooler. There was no reinvention of the wheel. Yes, there's a part in our story where we take a bit of a time jump, and so characters change appearance a little bit. Some of them do. But generally speaking, everybody looks exactly as they did back in the 80s and every iteration and their action figures. That's what Mattel wanted. That's why it's funny, like people online going like, you're going to mess it up. Blah, blah, blah. Do you think Mattel would have hired me to mess it up? They're in the toy selling business. And they want to sell toys, man. So like they made sure that this was exactly what they wanted it to be as well. So our eyes collectively popped when we saw the artwork. We didn't know back then that there would be figures for sure. We knew that Mattel would be doing He-Man figures. We didn't know if they would do them based on Revelation. But they liked the artwork so much that instantly they moved toward making the Masterverse figures, which are out right now. You can get a He-Man, Evil-Lyn, Skeletor, Moss-Man, or Skelegod. 5 different figures that are out right now. Not a Tila. For everybody that's like, this is a fucking Tila show. If it's a Tila show, we should have put Tila in wave 1 of the figures, if that's the case. But this is a Masters of the Universe show. Not a Tila show, not a He-Man show. Masters of the Universe. Full cast of characters, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Ralph Hartman asks, will Buzz Off and Mechanic be on the series? Yes and no. And I'll just leave it at that. I trust you're intrigued. Doug Leafan says, favorite part. What a great question. My favorite part of this process has been the entire fucking process. Working with everybody, coming up with cool ideas, watching it come to life, watching other people take my shit and make it better. Just because I come up with the whole story doesn't mean that that story didn't get better by being touched by so many different hands, the writers, the directors. So the collaborative effort and seeing material every week, every week they would send me a batch of here's some new drawings, or here's an animatic, or here's the first animated sequence. And, it's just pure joy. Or then recording, hanging out with cool famous people doing amazing voices for some goofy dialogue that I wrote and stuff. So all that was great. But I think my favorite part of this process was throughout the pandemic, I was so up in Motu's grill all the time. So in the morning I'd get up, smoke a joint, sit down and be like, well, if I didn't have writing to do or anything to do that, schedule wise, and I had free time, that's how I filled my free time. I didn't watch other people's stuff. I didn't watch movies or anything. I was like, you know what? Sometimes I'd be watching movies in my room and be like, I think Masters of the Universe is more gratifying than this. And come down here and I would watch the animatics all the way through, episodes 1 through 5. And then when they were fully animated, same thing. because once it starts going, you just want to keep going. You just want to keep reading and stuff like that. So I was very into my alone time with Masters of the Universe. Writing was great, as always. It's very fun to create and stuff. But, getting footage back and being able to just watch it over and over, and that would help you improve future episodes. And, hearing let's swap out that line of dialogue. And so, that to me was the best part. The performances are absolutely fucking mind-bendingly wonderful. Chris, Woody, Sarah, Mark, and Lena, Stephen Root as our Cringer, Liam Cunningham, Tiffany Smith, they're so wonderful. They worked so well together and gave such honest performances for, a pretty dishonest concept. There are no talking green cats in the world, kids. Okay. Chris Kopyar says, Orco looks to have leveled up to a badass status. How have you modernized some of these characters' personalities to fit in the 2021 world, but stay true to form? Now, what a great question. Remember, they're not in the 2021 world. They're in Eternia. So it's a fantasy land, and so we don't necessarily have to play how the world is today. That's why it's crazy. Everyone online is like, this is all woke and it's all politics. It's a fucking show with a talking green cat in it, man. How political you think we're going to get? There's no sex in this fucker. There's no politics. It's just good old adventure. Just people who really like each other, trying to help each other. That's one of my favorite aspects of this show. It's these characters genuinely like one another. There's human warmth between these two-dimensional cartoons. And so, we didn't have to bring it into 2021. We just had to add stakes. And to add stakes, you just have to add death or peril, real peril, not like in the old show where it's He-Man, I'm trapped, and he's the sword will, and then peril's gone. You take somebody out, somebody goes. You then got the audience attention going, wait a second, death is possible in this world. I had no idea and stuff. So at that point, when we were in the writer's room putting together the series, we looked at the Orco controversy. Not controversy, but a lot of people don't like Orco. That was their least favorite part of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He's silly and stupid, and he ruined it. It could have been a cool show without him. And there are people who absolutely love Orco, generally people who came into it as kids and liked Orco as a child. We decided to let's make Orco so beloved that people will get him as a tattoo. Let's take this character and jump him up. Yes, he powers up a bit, but everything about his story is so compelling and heartbreaking, and it'll get under your skin in a really moving way. We play Orco like the kid in the audience. The idea is Orco is the little kid in the group. So he's a kid's way into the show. Kids, of course, have power fantasies about, I want to be as strong as He-Man with the power sword. I want to be strong like Teela. But, they eventually identify the character that they're closest to, and that is Orco. He's kind of played very, childlike. And so we do the same thing. And, from little Orcos, mighty trees grow. That's all I can say. Yes, you'll love what we do with Orco. Joshua M. Josh Quirky says, He-Man is a boss. When will we see him and Skeletor in a relationship? Well, I hope I'm understanding this correctly. They've been in a relationship for nearly 40 years, man. That's kind of what our series is about. These two and how this war never ends and stuff like that. So we play that, and of course we do, in our storyline, we get to cross our characters over, not just for fights, although the fights are stunning. You finally get to see Skeletor and He-Man cross swords or cross the power sword with the Havoc staff. You'll see people get stabbed. It's pretty intense. So the physical fights, the physical relationship between them, we get to do more than they got to do in the kids' cartoon in the 80s. But for the conversational relationship between them, there are a couple really wonderful Skeletor, Adam, Skeletor, He-Man scenes, like that we never got to see in the old show and stuff, because they've got this relationship. And you know, I'm not saying like they love each other or anything like that. Nobody will ship He-Man and Skeletor, I assure you. But you know, they got a bond, and that's kind of a little bit about what our series is about. Trust I'm being obscure. Okay. Mingle27 says, do you think the new series will have a bigger impact on those who grew up with the original or new fans for younger and haven't seen anything? I honestly, the whole show started as a fan service show. Like, hey man, this is for the kids who grew up watching Masters of the Universe and stuff and bought the toys. So going into it, that's who originally it was designed for. Then, as we were into it, we were like, wait a sec. We can make this 4-quadrant. Kids could get into this. Because my idea was... My idea was that I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark with my father. And that day I saw, not my father, but the boy who my father was before he became a man. My dad had always been stoic type dad to me. And then at Raiders of the Lost Ark, he turned into a kid. He was like, oh my God, this is the kind of movie I used to see all the time when I was a kid. They called them cliffhangers. And then it would end and we'd have to come back the next week. This is amazing. They're doing a cliffhanger. Don't you understand? And like, he was so engaged with me. Normally he was a fairly quiet guy, but he was like so excited. I wanted that experience for people watching Masters of the Universe, Revelation. I've had that watching Marvel movies, you know, with my kid or my wife going, oh, let me explain stuff to you. This gives the audience a chance to be a storyteller as well. Because, you know, somebody who knows the material and goes way far back with it will be able to answer questions to anybody. You know, so the same way I watched WandaVision with my wife, and she'd be like, I don't understand, what does that mean? And I'm like, pause, let me tell you, man, because I've seen every Marvel movie there is and read all the comic books. So same thing here. You can watch this show with a Masters of the Universe version, a Motu version, kids who've never seen it, boyfriend, girlfriend who's never seen it, husband, wife who's never seen it, your parents who bought you the toys but never watched it, or maybe just know a passing familiarity and stuff. And everyone can like dive into it. Like, you know, it's incredibly rewarding if you've been a longtime fan, but if you're like, I have a passing familiarity, or even if you don't know it at all, you're going to be able to kind of sink into it and stuff. And so I think it's going to work like gangbusters for anyone growing up on this stuff. But I honestly feel like the bonding agent between parent and kid is going to bring in that young audience. I mean, number one, it's colorful, like kids can watch it. It's high adventure. It's not too scary and stuff like that. So, you know, it's a cartoon. Kids get into cartoons. At least they did when I was a fucking kid. But also on top of that, I feel like it's a very engaging cartoon. I don't know if this helps, but Sarah's kids watched the show. Her boy was watching the show, and he was like, I want to know what happens next. Can we get the next 6? And she's like, I think I know a guy. So, and he was like, I was like, well, he likes it because, you know, you play Tila. And she's like, no, he was not interested in me in the least. She's going, he just loves the show. He thinks it's awesome. So I think it's going to work for kids as well. So I think it'll have an impact on, if you know any of this and love any of this and have ever loved it, collected the toys, this whole series is a fucking love letter to you. If you're brand new to it all, I think you'll be shocked at how easily you could sink into it, how easily you could fall down the rabbit hole with us, man. You'll have the power, damn it. Okay. Tyler Hanley says, how much were the original toys referenced in creating the characters' looks for the show? Very much so, Tyler, because this is a Mattel television production, so it's all predicated on the toys more than the cartoons that ever happened. So more so than the Filmation cartoons, Revelation is built on the world of the toys. More so than the 2002 Mike Young productions, ours leans heavily into the Mattel because Mattel owns what it owns and stuff. So, and it's Mattel Television, so they want to do their version. Now, luckily, the figures and the Filmation cartoon kind of look similar because the designs were very similar and stuff. So, you know, the world of like, okay, what are they going to look like? It's pretty easy. It's like, well, we'll make them look like the figures looked. And, you know, that's kind of what the cartoon looks like as well. The big thing was the vehicles, because I'd written in the Land Shark, Bashosaurus, everything and stuff, Wind Raiders. And, you know, the boys, Pat and Adam, our directors, like scanned in toys. Like they didn't just do a drawing of it. Like it's a scanned in version of your childhood toy, you know, and Mattel was very happy about that. Anytime we leaned into the toys, which was like everything we did, or anytime we were like, ooh, this could be a new toy, they were like, yeah. Like, yeah, more of that, less of everything else. Less nihilism, more toys, you know, so it's very much based on the line of toys. Slutty Ouija says, I'll watch either way, but is the show mainly about Tila instead of Adam? No. Tila's in it, and she plays a big part, as I've been saying from the beginning. But just like in every episode of even He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the Filmation show, she's right there next to He-Man, either next to Adam, protecting him, or fighting side by side with He-Man. So she's a big character. She plays prominently in our storyline as well. I would not go so far as to say it's a Tila show. This is a Masters of the Universe show. It's not called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe because Filmation owns that, as previously established. But it covers all of the characters. And Tila is a big part of it, particularly with the storyline that we're kind of tipping our hat to from the old Filmation show. And any true fan knows what I'm talking about. So, yes, Tila's in it. But it's very much about He-Man. As somebody on the internet, much smarter than me, pointed out, Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, or even, you know, Justice League, is about Superman. And Superman, you know, is dead and really pops in at the very, very end. That's not what happens in Master of the Universe Revelation, but you can have a thing be about somebody, you know, and not have that character in every damn scene. He wasn't in every damn scene of the cartoon that we're sequelizing spiritually. So we didn't feel the need to do that as well. But he's our main character. He's our Superman. He's our Batman. He's the big guy. However, like people keep looking in the wrong direction because they're like, oh, I heard it was a Tila show, man. You know, once you see the story trailer, because everyone's seen the teaser trailer, the story trailer kind of makes it clear what we've been not saying for a long time. You know, and if you don't get it from the story trailer, then you'll get it when you watch the show. But, you know, He-Man's all over this. He's in every episode of the show. And Adam's in a lot of it as well. Prince Adam, a very important part of the He-Man equation. So again, pretty soon everyone's going to see everything, but like the revelation will be revealed. But no, it's not a Tila show. This goes back to somebody had put up a tweet months back, and they said, I heard from insiders that in this show, Tila is a better He-Man than He-Man. Tila has to prove she's a better He-Man than He-Man, and she's got a girlfriend. And very specifically, I joked, I was like, hey, where were you? We could have used your help in the writer's room, but that's really not true at all. And it's not. That is not what the fucking show's about. Somebody then asked me like, hey man, like, or I responded to another tweet where I was like, it's He-Man. It's a He-Man adventure. It's a He-Man and he's the focus of the fucking story, center of the story. It's absolutely true. None of that is fucking untrue. So, you know, do I feel like it's a Tila show? It's as much a Tila show as it is a He-Man show because it's a Masters of the Universe show. Everybody gets a lot of screen time. And you know, it's just funny from where I sit because everyone's like pointing at one thing and missing the very obvious, but maybe they'll find it. But yeah, it's Masters of the Universe, kids. All of the characters, all of them. Stop looking at just one thing. You're missing a very big part of all this, but you know, you'll see when you see it. Okay. Carlos Fandangos, we'll end with Carlos. He says, what was your favorite He-Man character and how have you changed them for the new show, if at all? I mean, Skeletor is my favorite character, hands down. But you don't change a character like Skeletor. You lean into everything that character is about, but you get Mark Hamill to do his voice and take it to like the next dimension. So I loved Skeletor going in, and you could see in all the Skeletor dialogue, like whether I'm credited with writing the episodes or not, I write on every episode as the story editor. I came up with the entire story, and then people wrote separate episodes, but I come on top of them. That sounds dirtier than I meant it, but I follow them. And, you know, sometimes I have to follow them based on notes I got from Netflix. Sometimes I follow them based on my own taste, where I'm like, I don't like that, but I would rather do this. So, you know, I got to write on every single episode and stuff. And Skeletor dialogue in every episode, whether I'm credited with writing the episode or not, went through my filter, because I was writing it the whole time for Mark. Even before we talked about casting it, in my head, I was like, this is Mark Hamill. It's definitely going to be Mark. You know, you need the Joker to play fucking Skeletor. That's for damn sure. So I was kept writing and rewriting everyone's Skeletor to stick it into Mark's voice and stuff. So Skeletor going in was my favorite character. Coming out, I'm a big fan of He-Man. Now, He-Man for me was always like the least interesting character when I used to watch the show, because, you know, it's just the guy with brute strength who could do everything. He's Superman, essentially. You know, and Superman is a tough character to write for because he is so powerful. And at the end of the day, unless he's fighting Jesus or Kryptonite, Superman's going to win. So in telling the story we tell of He-Man and, more importantly, Prince Adam, I fell in love with that character. Like, I realized he's a superhero. He just doesn't wear a suit. He doesn't wear a costume. He's nipples out, barbarian chested. But he is absolutely a superhero, has all the earmarks of Superman, and that's kind of how we wrote him in the show. Just noble, like got a real good heart. And, you know, but he's a boy, so there's the Shazam element to it as well. So Adam became one of my favorite characters. He-Man as well, of course, but Adam particularly became one of my characters. His noble heart just like makes my eyes well up. But Eva Lynn, man, that was the shocker, that she became one of my favorite characters too. Because I remember asking Teddy early on in the process, Ted Biaselli over at Netflix, I was like, who's your favorite character? And he goes, oh, I love Eva Lynn. I was like, what? I was like, no one's an Eva Lynn fan, man. And he's like, I am. I love that character. I think she's got depth and she's got levels and stuff like that. So in telling the story that we tell for Revelation, I too like fell in love with Eva Lynn. You know, it certainly helps when you have Lena Headey or Headey doing the voice, Cersei herself, fucking rocking the shit out of Evelyn. Let me tell you something right now. If they ever do a live action Masters of the Universe, they have to hire Lena, because she has defined the role. Wait until you see what she does. And what she did with it made me really fall in love with that character. But I fell in love with them all. I love these characters so much. You know, some people online have been like, you big grown up man, you lied, and shit like that. Like, let me tell you something right now. I guarantee you I've watched more He-Man than you ever have in your entire life. You know, it's not a challenge. You're not going to win anything if you're right or wrong and shit. But like, aside from watching it when I did in real time when I was a kid, I rewatched it again going into this because I did not want to fuck this up, man. I said, no way. I never will go into your superhero movies because I'm like, that's too much pressure, man. You could fuck that up and then the whole audience hates you. I'd rather just be the guy that watches them and points out the shit that's wrong and shit like that. Put no skin in the game. But this time I put skin in the game, and it was with the unlikeliest character. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I ever thought some of the best work I ever did in my life would be done with the character of He-Man, I'd be like, yeah, what am I making jokes? Jay and Silent Bob have a He-Man riff in it that's something like the Star Wars? Like, yeah, how could that happen? And now I know how it could happen, man. I stepped out of my comfort zone, and I jumped into a world that I was familiar with, but also not achingly so. You know, for years I remember going like, man, Chris Nolan made a great fucking Batman movie, and he's not even like the world's biggest Batman fan. You don't even have to be, man. You come to love these characters, though, deeply with your entire being. And so I love the Motu family. I love Duncan. I love Tila, Cringer, Orco, all the relationships. The Sorceress became like such an amazing character. I'd never really liked the Sorceress when I watched the show in the 80s. Love the Sorceress now. Certainly helps that, you know, it's Susan Eisenberg doing her voice, the voice of Wonder Woman and stuff. But how she's written now, and it's not like we created anything new for this sorceress. It was all there in the Masters of the Universe mythology and lores already established by Mattel. So, you know, I've fallen in love with all these characters, and even more so watching the shows come to life. But yeah, hands down, I would say going in, I was like Skeletor. It's all about Skeletor, and coming out, I'm like Adam and Evelyn. That's to me, that's the heart of what we did with Revelation. Kids, you're going to see it soon, July 23rd. On July 24th, we're going to drop. That sounds very hip. On the YouTube channel, a series called Masters of the Universe Revelation Celebration, celebrating the writers behind each episode, where I sit down and talk about the writing of each episode with the writer of each episode, man. So I sit down with Dia, with Mark, with Tim, and with Eric. So you'll watch that. That'll happen July 21st. First off, July 23rd at midnight, get your ass to Netflix and consume all 5 episodes of Masters of the Universe Revelation. You will enjoy yourselves, I promise you. Then, if you want to know more, jump back to the YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Kevin Smith, and watch the commentary tracks with me and the writers, man. But for the time being, thank you for giving me the questions. I wish we could have got to more, but we got to more than I was thinking about. And I'll see you for the commentary tracks, man. Masters of the Universe Revelation Celebration. Until then, I'm Kevin Smith saying, you have the power.